As their name suggests, the house sparrows are closely associated with humans, and they build their nests near our homes and farms. Even when there are no other birds singing, there is always a constant chirping sound from the sparrows, making the garden seem alive. The only time there's an eerie kind of silence is when we've had a visit from the sparrowhawk. When they leave the nest at about 14 days old, the fledglings can fly reasonably well, but are completely reliant on the parents for food. Looking at this little fledgling though, I think it may have left the nest a couple of days early. For the first 2 weeks after leaving the nest, both parents will feed and look after the young ones, but often after just 2 to 3 days, the female will turn her attentions to laying a second or third batch of eggs, and leave the caring duties to the male. At the end of these 2 weeks, the male will abandon the fledglings and join the female to share the brooding of the next clutch of eggs. For the first few days while they were still in the nest, they were fed live food, such as aphids and small caterpillars, then larger insects, and by the time they were ready to fledge, seeds were also being introduced into their feeds. Although sparrows are seed eaters, live food is essential for the nestlings because of the water it contains. To start with, the fledglings are completely reliant on their parents for food. Although in the early stages, they peck around at all sorts of things, it's about a week before they start to feed for themselves. It's difficult to say whether it's instinctive or just copying the parents, but at this stage they will peck at virtually anything, including a sibling's tail. What appears more likely to be instinctive behaviour is dust bathing. It just seems to come naturally to them at a very early age. Hygiene is very important for house sparrows, because unlike other birds, they use the same nest all year round, returning to it to roost, even when the breeding season's over. At about 10 days after leaving the nest, the young fledglings will instinctively start to drink water. Can I just emphasise that if you find an abandoned nestling or a young fledgling and have to temporarily look after it, never try to give it water from a dropper, as this can get into its lungs and choke it. Up to this stage it gets all its water requirements from its early diet of insects and caterpillars brought by the parents. If you're not sure about its age and think it may be in need of a drink, just put some water in a shallow dish and leave it. Then if it needs water, it will drink for itself. A few days after they start drinking, they find another use for water. I'm not sure if it's natural instinct or curiosity, but just like children, they start splashing about in the water. And it's not long before they go into the proper bathing motion, followed by preening their feathers. Surprisingly, nestlings actually start preening while they're still in the nest. The mortality rate amongst juveniles is very high, but this falls as they reach adulthood. And the two most common causes are predation and starvation. When you look at the first 4 weeks of life of the house sparrow, especially the latter 2 weeks, from when the fledglings leave the nest until they're abandoned by the parents and have to fend for themselves, there's no way that either nature or nurture on its own could account fully for such rapid development of the skills that these little birds acquire. There must be a combination of both, plus a great deal of rapid learning by trial and error. Although these little fledglings have acquired some of the basic skills needed, they still have a great deal to learn if they are to survive through to become adults next year. Unfortunately, it's just part of nature that most of these little fledglings will not make it through to breed next year. In fact, there's a mortality rate of about 80% in the first year. Each pair of sparrows can have 2 or 3 clutches of eggs a year, giving an average of 11 eggs, from which they can expect to successfully raise 6 of these to the fledgling stage. The mortality rate for these young birds in their first year is very high at about 80%, which means the chances are that only one of them will survive to breed next year. The mortality rate amongst adult birds is about 40%, meaning that one, or again to be more precise 1.2, will survive to breed again in year 2. This means that there will again be 2 birds to breed in year 2. I've used the figure 1 instead of the precise 1.2 for both adult and juvenile survivors, as this allows for 20% of birds not breeding successfully, and it also makes the chart much simpler. In year 2 the figures work out the same, meaning that in year 3 there are again 2 adults to breed. All things being equal, this means that we should have a steady population of house sparrows. But this isn't happening. There's a concerning decline in the house sparrow population over recent years. Personally, I think the 2 main reasons for this are the lack of nesting sites around our ultra-modern homes and the shortfall in the availability of live food to feed the young birds during the breeding season. Despite the national decline in the sparrow population, I have a thriving colony of about 15 nests in the ivy on the back of the house that have been there for the last 30 years, plus many more come in from the local area. I put this success down to there being plenty of nesting sites and the 2 kilograms of live mealworms a week that they get through during the nesting period. I just hope that this decline in the sparrow population doesn't continue, as I hate the thought of a garden without any cheeky sparrows there to greet me every time I come out of the house.